We are joined by MTV News national correspondent Jamil Smith. And Jamil, in a recent piece for MTVnews.com, you wrote this: Kaepernick's protest and the reaction to it reminds us that too many Americans still can't even bring themselves to have a conversation about our nation's historic and present-day struggles with racism. Kaepernick's protest may not help wake those people up, but it showed how often the greatest love for our nation is shown by those who seek to improve it. Interesting. So, if what is happening is that Colin Kaepernick is seeking to improve this nation, why are we talking about the way he's choosing to protest?
Well, too often I feel like when any kind of, celebrity or athlete protests, police brutality, or anything specifically to do with injustice for African Americans, too often the focus gets to, well, isn't everything good here? Why aren't you grateful for what you have? Especially if you make $114 million like Colin Kaepernick. So I feel like, you have Donald Trump saying, hey, he should go find another country where it's easier. All these things are just, red herrings. Really, I think it's ways for people to avoid the conversations about really tough topics.
Because the critics aren't just saying, isn't it all good here? They're actually saying, never mind that. Why are you protesting the national anthem?
All right. Well, they feel like, the national anthem, all this sort of pomp and circumstance that happens before sporting events, really dates back to Woodrow Wilson. And really, it's all about supporting the military, quote unquote. That's what we've come to believe. But in fact, it's a way for him to say, look, I am not going to stand up for a flag that represents a country that does these things to my people. I think that's a perfectly understandable response and, frankly, a really interesting exercise of the First Amendment.
Now we see that Colin Kaepernick sat down and he had a teammate with him at this past game, and also a player from the Seattle Seahawks, cornerback Jeremy Lane, also sat, and he said it was in support of Colin Kaepernick.
Yes.
What do you make of what you're seeing now?
Well, I understand that Kaepernick had a meeting with another teammate of his, Nate Boyer, a military veteran, who was a long snapper for the 49ers, and they talked about his protest, and Boyer came to understand that, this is an American exercising an American right, and that, they came to an understanding about the fact that this isn't about the military. It's about the police. It's about the lack of government action to deal with various arenas of racial injustice. So, I mean, I think really when we get back to the actual meaning of his protest, I don't think that there should be too many people disagreeing with it. And when you see people saying that, oh, he shouldn't have the right to play football because he sits out an anthem that has nothing to do with football, that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
But is it working? Maybe there might have been a better protest, because what we're talking about is that he sat down during the national anthem instead of the actual issue.
Well, what I think is, he did it in the most visible way that he possibly could. This is a guy who's a backup quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, unless he, does it in the middle of the field, I don't see any way that he's going to do it any more visibly. So I understand exactly why he did it, the way that he did it. Now, there may have been, another way, what have you. Maybe he shows up at a protest. Maybe he, gets involved with local organizers, but that's not on television. That doesn't get us talking about it.
Yeah. So here's what people are talking about today. Colin Kaepernick and his socks. It's causing a bit of controversy. He tried to get out ahead of it. These socks that sort of show a cartoon pig with a police hat on. He said, look, that what I'm sort of commenting on with the socks is that these are rogue officers that put the community in danger. They also put good officers in danger. But still, for many, this is kind of like distasteful. It kind of smacks of painting all officers with a broad brush. Does this diminish his argument?
No, because those pictures, first of all, came from before he staged his protest, number one. Number two is the fact that, despite wearing the socks being a little bit juvenile, I think the underlying point that he's trying to make is valid. That, yes, there are some cops that, frankly, are bad seeds within police departments, but this is a systemic issue. And that, the silence of, quote unquote, good cops is contributing to that.
Yeah. The way that the nation has reacted, is this an indication of just how uncomfortable we still are with race? Even though throughout this entire election season, race has become a major issue for, whether it's African American people or brown people, it's become a topic of conversation. Still, we seem to be talking around it and not about it.
I think it's not only an indication of how uncomfortable we are talking about race and racism, two different things, but also about how twisted our idea of patriotism is. We think patriotism is standing up, when they call us for the anthem and putting our hands over our hearts and having pride in America. Well, having pride in America also should mean wanting America to be better than it is, and recognizing her faults. So, I kind of go by the old James Baldwin maxim of like, I love America so much that I, reserve the right to criticize her unconditionally. That is exactly what I'm seeing here with Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah. Talking about politics, Donald Trump had a comment to make about this, and he basically said, look, if you don't like this country, you can find another place to work, find another country to go to. How do you think the candidates can advance this conversation? What would you like to be hearing from them? Frankly, I'd love to hear a lot more constructive comment than that. Yeah. That comment reflects a lack of deep thinking about what Kaepernick is doing, and also a complete ignorance of his actual purpose. What I'd love to see maybe from Hillary Clinton or some of the other candidates is a really deep look at what Kaepernick is talking about, and not only saying, hey, he has the right to do this, but also saying, hey, we have plans as candidates to address it. Jamil Smith, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chris, been clear.